Hey everyone, it's Michael. I hope you're doing well today, and I have a video here to talk about a topic I've been kicking around in my head, one that if you asked me tomorrow, I may very well have a completely different answer from what I have today. But this is a topic that I've wanted to cover for a while. It's one that I've thought about for years now. I see other people discuss it too in the comic community of any sort. But anyway, a subscriber, viewer of mine named TortaViejo123 actually reminded me about this topic a few weeks ago. Thank you, dude, for doing that, because I kept forgetting about what I wanted to cover with this, and what I wanted to say. And I'm not joking, I've tried to record this video like 20 different times, and it keeps getting too long. I need to cut it down. Anyway, the topic of discussion, as the title says, is what do I prefer, American comics or manga? So, manga, I'm going to define both of these terms that I mean with American comics and manga. With manga, it could be anything from Japanese manga. It's really the only outside source of comics that I have any kind of real exposure to. I've never touched on bande dessinée or anything like that from France, or Europe for that matter. But anyway, manga could be anything. It could be Shonen Jump stuff, which is the majority of what I've read. It could be other company works that I've read, like Berserk or Die Dark, or one of my newer favorites, Go Go Loser Ranger. It could be anything like that. It could be some of their horror stuff that I have read, like Doubt and Dead Company. I keep trying to call that Bad Company, but it's called Dead Company. When it comes to American comics, obviously you could have the big two, Marvel and DC. You could have the indie companies that I've read a ton of, like Dark Horse or IDW. Or you could have just local authors that I've read before. As an American, I feel like this video is going to come across kind of biased, but my answer to the question is that I prefer American comics. But there's a lot of caveats to that. There's a lot of caveats in the sense of, number one, we 90s kids here in America, we grew up in a very special generation that I don't think people really take into account, whether it be our parents, who technically lived through this stuff too, and technically if some of them were young enough, like my parents were, they kind of grew up through this stuff too, you know? In American culture, for anybody who doesn't recall this, if you happen to be young or if you happen to be foreign to us, essentially, here in America in the 90s, even if you didn't get into comic books yet, like how I didn't even get into comics really heavily until I became an adult and started reading them cheaply on my Nook or on my Kindle when I got one from my wife. Really, essentially, I didn't get into comics at all. Like, I would read some of my uncle's comics when I was a kid, here and there. It wasn't anything new. It was all 70s and 80s material, pretty much, like when Hobgoblin first appeared, or when that stupid Spider-Man Spider-Mobile Dune buggy thing existed. You know, my exposure to Spider-Man and Batman comics were that 70s and 80s era, and I just wasn't crazy about it as a kid, despite the art being cool here and there. When I was a kid, here in American comics, in culture, I mean, we had amazing cartoons coming out left and right for every superhero you could imagine. Spider-Man, the animated series. Then you had Spider-Man Unlimited. You had Batman, the animated series. And not too long after that, in the early 2000s, we had the Batman cartoon that I'm about to finish rewatching right now. You had X-Men. You had eventually an Incredible Hulk cartoon. You had so many good cartoons out there, there were no words for how iconic they could be. And a lot of them you probably haven't even heard of. But at the same time, you started having a lot of live-action Marvel movies being made. We had Christopher Reeve's Superman. We had George Reeves' Superman TV show. We had the pulp stuff, like with, oh god, I'm forgetting his name right now. It's one of my favorite Supermen ever, the old black and white pulp series. There were two of them. But anyway, is it Kirk Allen? Is that his name? I'm sorry, guys. I'm completely forgetting his name right now, but I loved that guy. But also, we had Batman in live action from the 1989 movie onward through up to the 90s, and I loved Batman and Robin as a kid. But this is the thing, we had not really had many cool Marvel movies made, and no joke, within the year 2000 when X-Men dropped, within the first 5 or 6 years of X-Men dropping, up to 2006, we had Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, we almost had Spider-Man 3, which was 2007, we had X2, I think X-Men 3 was 2006, we had Punisher, Daredevil, Ghost Rider, and Incredible Hulk, or The Hulk. We had Batman Begins drop, which is not Marvel, but still. we had a lot of cool stuff coming out. And at the same time, even right before all of these live action movies started coming out, and the good cartoons too, like The Batman, not animated series, The Batman, even before all of those things dropped, America began to get, on Cartoon Network especially, foreign cartoons called anime from Japan that were based on manga. And I never read any manga until I became an adult, just like when I got into comics. As much as I loved the things I'm about to talk about, I never got to read them until I got a lot older, and still haven't read all of them, for example. So when I was a kid, there would be cartoons on like Toonami, and on Cartoon Network in general. I think the earliest one I ever saw was Ronin Warriors, and I think I might have seen a little bit of Gundam, but I could be getting that wrong. But the big one that kicked everything off for me was Dragon Ball Z. And I think we can all agree to that. Dragon Ball Z changed American culture. I know it's Japanese. I know we all thought it was just a really cool, more graphic, tough cartoon when we were all kids here. And anybody telling you otherwise, they're fucking lying to you. All of us thought it was another cartoon. Every kid thought it was another cartoon. No one knew it was anime. No one knew anything about that stuff. No one knew it was Japanese. We just all thought it was a super cool, high-quality cartoon because all of our other cartoons within a year or two here in America began to reference it. I remember Codename Kids Next Door referencing that. So we all thought it was American, despite what anybody will tell you. And that was a big deal. Not too long after that, you had things like Cowboy Bebop coming here on like Adult Swim. Anime became a big deal here. And I got to be part of the generation that didn't even know that wasn't American stuff, but grew up with it nonetheless and loved it and adored it. And we had, anime and manga's influence on American culture in the sense of our cartoons, like I said, not just being referenced, but then things like Samurai Jack got made, and the Star Wars Clone Wars cartoon, the first one, not the newer one, everybody knows from Dave Filoni, the first Clone Wars cartoon between episode 2 and 3, when those were coming out in the theaters. Those are heavily influenced by anime. They just are, and I love that about them. It made them stylistically stand out compared to everything else we had. But that change in culture, that change in entertainment was felt so deeply you don't understand unless you were there. The big anime manga influence we have now, you don't understand what it was like to be an American back then, and an American kid on top of that getting to experience all this cool shit at one time. And then having things like Yu Yu Hakusho come out being a big deal. Anyway, getting back to the topic at hand, manga has so many good things about it, and I want to kind of cover those things first of what I love, what I appreciate about it so much to this day, compared to American comics, but why I still prefer American comics. And again, it might come across more biased, and again, if you ask me tomorrow, I may give you a completely different answer and might go with manga instead. But heading up the conversation, manga, it's in black and white pretty much always. The volumes that come out are typically cheap. They're 200 pages, sometimes longer. You can get giant omnibuses that are 3 volumes in one that usually cost a buy 2 get 1 free type of price, where you'll pay $20 for 3 volumes in one book. You're always seeing stores like Books A Million and Barnes & Noble do big manga sales. At least I do. And it's really awesome. It's really popular for a reason. And I stick more with, like, stuff that's... I read a lot of shonen, but, like, newer shonen I don't like as much. Like, I've been reviewing Kagurabaki. Many of you know my feelings on those. It's a little back and forth with me. Then there's things that's popular, like Attack on Titan, that I'm just not obsessed with. I also get bummed that I cannot find any horror stuff. I can find thriller, like Doubt, from manga that I enjoy, but straight out horror, like monsters or anything ethereal and fear-wise, I don't think manga does horror well, which is surprising, because I love J-horror, which for anybody who doesn't know is Japanese horror, like The Grudge, like The Ring. I think both of those are Japanese specifically. You had Pulse, which I think is also horror from Japan. I love Asian horror movies, just in general. But the Japanese really know how to make some scary-ass movies. If you haven't watched things like the original Grudge films, you're missing out. Or The Slit-Mouthed Woman. Oh my god, if you haven't seen that. You need to if you're a horror fan. I need to cover those movies sometime. For my horror channel, I mean, not here. But anyway, so I'm surprised that Japanese horror comics are not good, or horror manga is not that good. I've never read Junji Ito, or however you say his name. Everybody loves him to death. His stuff just does not appeal to me, and that's kind of an unfair criticism, but it's true. I might read Uzumaki at some point. That's like a $20 book at like Walmart right now, which is shocking. I never thought I would see Japanese horror being sold at Walmart, but I am. But I may buy that sometime and check it out. Anyway, so I love horror, and I love how in American comics, DC or Marvel, you have some really awesome horror stuff, whether it be just individual issues, like when Marvel was called Atlas back in the day, and they had the Strange Tales lines of stories that I really, really love. I read them all the time on Kindle. Or like DC had like House of Mystery, or The Witching Hour and stuff. Those are right up my alley. And we don't really get comics like that anymore. We get stuff like Creepshow and whatever from other companies, indie companies, but we don't really get straight out horror or like Tales from the Crypt types of stuff like comics used to do from EC Comics back in the day. And I wish manga did that, but it doesn't. At least as far as I know, at least imported to the US, we don't have that. If you do have options out there, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to check them out. I'd pay a good price for them. But getting to the price part, I love that manga typically is $10 to $15 for almost a 200-page book. And again, sometimes it's larger than that. Berserk for $15 can be closer to 260 or 250 pages. And that's great. And I love the art style typically in most manga that I've read. And it doesn't have to be amazing artwork. It can just be a very basic, probably reused backgrounds thing like a lot of Dragon Ball apparently did. And I didn't even notice it in Dragon Ball. That's how good it is. You know, how smart it is. Toriyama was a genius. Toyotaru was a genius when it comes to that. But when I read other stuff like Berserk, I think Berserk, even in black and white, which I actually, to be honest with you, I kind of prefer comics to be that way, and I love how manga uses that cheaper paper quality to keep the prices down. They don't bullshit you like modern American comics do with crazy glossy paper and coloring, and then they try to charge you out the ass for a 60-page book is like $15 or $25 or $30. An Epic Collection or a DC Finest are like $50 to $60 a piece. That's fucking crazy. I'm not paying that either. It's one thing if you get it as a gift, but it's another for you to actively be willing to pay that price. But manga can be $10 to $15 a piece. And yet something like Berserk in black and white, I think is one of the most beautiful pieces of art I've ever seen drawn in my life. Has some of the most beautiful pictures I've ever seen drawn in my life. And I would argue that it's more beautiful than the color pictures on nicer paper that we get in the US typically. Even compared to something like Batman Earth 1 that I consider a masterpiece, or something classical that I enjoy but I don't love like most people do, like The Killing Joke. You know, I know that's a controversial opinion, but it's the truth. Even down with manga, I would say I'm really picky about what I want to try out. And I seem like with American comics, I'm a lot more lenient on picking up stuff. Older stuff, mainly. It's got to be like 70s to like less than 2010s, like maybe 70s to like 2009 are really where I'll pick stuff up, and maybe a select series here and there of newer stuff like Absolute Batman or any kind of Star Wars Darth Vader series they do. But that's really about it for me with newer stuff. But I'll pick up anything from the 70s to like 2010. I really will. If it looks cool, I'll typically pick it up because usually it's really good, in my opinion, from what my tastes have developed over the years. But with Japanese manga, I'm really picky about things because a lot of stuff looks kind of cartoonish. And that's my biggest issue. A lot of stuff, at least imported here, is kind of cartoonish looking. And a lot of manga has that Japanese sense of humor like you'd see in Dragon Ball, where something goofy would happen and everybody would have like a duh moment. And then all of a sudden, the next second, everybody would just automatically be upside down like they couldn't believe how stupid a character was, you know? A lot of manga has that type of humor to it, and sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't, depending on who we're talking about and what we're talking about. So, I have to flick through a book before I buy it for manga. But there's stuff I'll pick up just on willy-nilly. This looks cool, I'm going to check it out because it looks like it's for me, like Drifters. I recently bought the first omnibus of that from Barnes & Noble, 3 volumes in one, and it looks sick. I can't wait to read that. I did that with Berserk. I had heard a lot of people like Blows Himself Up dude talk about it back in the day, and I grabbed it because it looked fucking cool. It looked like something I would dig, even though I don't like fantasy. Now it's one of my favorite series ever. So, that's my point. Manga, when it looks like something that appeals to me, it's almost always worth the money I pay for it. Almost always. I would say like 95% of the time. My guess, based on what I'm seeing from the shelves, all the constantly expanding shelves of Barnes & Noble, for example, every time I go in, there's like a new shelf added to that section of the store. It's taken over the back of our building out there, the one that I go to the most. I have a few different ones around here, but every time I go to the one particular one, there's always new shelves added. My guesses are usually about 95% good on manga. And I would say they're about 80% or 85% good with what I pick out for American comics. And, you know, Goku is probably my favorite superhero of all time, being from manga, being from Dragon Ball. But I still can't help but in unison, looking at everything I've read from manga, everything I've seen from manga, I don't think they have as cool of heroes. They have great stories, and I love that their stories have a beginning, middle, and end. It's something that American comics need to learn, and once upon a time I thought we were with Ultimate Spider-Man, and now hopefully with Absolute Universe, like Absolute Batman and stuff at DC. But it seems like, to me, in my personal taste, I don't feel like manga has enough cool superheroes. And I don't feel like they have enough anti-heroes, too, that kind of like lead a story. They're usually a side character to a character who's completely good. Look at Vegeta compared to Goku, you know what I mean? I love both, but like I like anti-heroes. I love, like in American comics, Ghost Rider, Venom, Punisher. I love stuff like that. That's really where my love for comics comes from, is that anti-hero feel and what you can do with that. And when they turn that up on side of its head, you know, like with Agent Venom from, you know, Flash Thompson in the Rick Remender run especially. Those things are special. Manga doesn't have as much of that from what I've read. Again, from what I've read. I haven't read and reviewed a ton for this channel, but I've read quite a bit enough to know what I've seen, and experimented enough with different series enough to know what I mean, what I want. But in American comics, you don't just have that one Goku character. Like I said, I just gave you 3 off the top of my head I love. There are characters that I love that are not in the greatest comics ever, like Spider-Man, or like Iron Man for that matter, or Captain America for that matter. I haven't read a whole lot of Iron Man and Captain America, but from what I have read, there's maybe one good Iron Man run that I've read, and maybe kinda one good Captain America run. That being said, I've only read like maybe 2 runs of Captain America and maybe 3 of Iron Man. But not a full run either. It's experimenting, like I said. Maybe I fell out of comics for a little bit and dropped those series. And maybe that's unfair to bring that up, but it is. When I look at something like Wolverine, he's kind of an anti-hero, but he's a good guy, and I see a lot of cool shit from him. I'm currently starting and reading the Claremont X-Men run. I now have all of the old black and white Marvel Essential books of it. And I'm having a great time with that. I think Claremont fucking kills it with the stuff that he did back then. American comics have so many variety, but both manga and American comics are now learning the wrong lessons. Like, American comics started really fucking up around 2010, like I said. Started really having issues. They haven't made money in a long time. And so they jab at the customers. Instead of doing what manga was doing, which topped the sales here in the US, they're just now, at both companies, the biggest companies, DC and Marvel, putting out, like, like the digest copies, like almost like a mass market paperback, $10 copies, and from Marvel, $15 copies of the DC Compact Editions and the Marvel Premiere Collections. And I love how the market had to make those now. You know, because to compete with manga, you had to lower the prices, which proves the point. Both of these companies have been ripping you off for years, and you were too dumb and gullible as a fan to keep going with it and not acknowledge that you were being screwed. Not acknowledging there was another option, and those books are in color. Both of those companies put out cheaper digest copies in color, and they're fantastic. I love both versions of those companies' work there. They look great. They feel great in both editions, even though the Marvel one's a little bit bigger than the DC one. And the Marvel one feels like it has a tighter spine. It might last longer. I don't know. But those things are awesome. And I think both companies, both both entertainment industries, manga and American comics, are kind of losing the plot on some stuff. I feel like the voting system that's coming through with Shonen Jump, things like Kagurabaki are making that worse and worse. You see things like Kagurabaki, and in my opinion, My Hero Academia, I'm not impressed. I'm like 2 volumes in, and it just does not appeal to me. I don't know what it is about that. I don't dig it. But Kagurabaki is rushed to hell, which is why I'll probably wait until they eventually get an anime and watch that instead, because the books have been rushed to death, and if I hadn't bought as many as I had already, I probably would have quit by now. American comics have the same issue of, for the last 10 years, people are acting like it's a big issue now, and maybe it's worse. I don't know, because I don't read a whole lot of new stuff. Comic series will get 4 to 5 issues on what's supposed to be an ongoing, and then it gets canceled because they've pissed the customers off so much they stopped reading it. And that's more of an issue here than it is overseas of the creators and the companies talking shit to the fans and pissing on us who buy their bullshit. You don't have that as much in manga. You just don't. You might have bad endings. You might have bad choices made in those stories. You don't have those mangaka, the authors, the creators, taking shits on us. You know? And also, you don't really have a whole lot of sequels and prequels and stuff. If you pick up a number 1 in manga, you're pretty much getting the beginning of the story, unless it's like Pokemon, which usually has variations on the title that makes it a little bit easier, but not always. If you pick up Naruto, if you pick up Dragon Ball, they have the different titles, but you have to be careful, especially if you tell grandma to go get a copy for you. You gotta be careful with that, Meanwhile, in American comics, how many Spider-Man number 1s existed through history? I have a bunch in my collection. Not even single issues, just in trade volumes and omnibuses and stuff. How many number 1s do we have of Spider-Man, or especially Batman, or Superman for that matter? How many do we have? We're talking possibly hundreds at this point, because they just keep restarting and doing miniseries and stuff. With manga, you don't have that. You get the beginning, middle, and end, like I referenced earlier, and thank God for that. Because you don't... American comics are so bad about that, and now they cancel series constantly. Even if it's something that's slightly appealing, they kind of put you in a box where if you're not buying issue to issue, if you're doing trade waiting like I do, because stories are so, compressed at this point, or decompressed, or whatever it is. I think it's compressed is what I'm actually meaning here. I'm getting thrown off. It's early still. Comics are so compressed with, I guess decompressed, actually. That's what I mean. Where they're expanded out, there's too much filler and too much wasted space and time to feel cinematic instead of like comics always had. Yeah, it is decompressed, I mean. That's become such an issue now that, you feel like you're wasting your time if you don't pick up a trade. It's not worth the price tag for $5 and $6 and $7 a month. To pick up single issues. It's just not. American comics need to get away from that and go more towards the digest copies like manga has done. If DC Compact Comic Editions and Marvel Premier Collections don't prove that, and manga doesn't prove that to the market, I don't know what could at this point. I'm surprised we're still getting comics from Marvel and DC, to be honest with you. But let's talk about some more of the indie companies that I love. I'm a huge fan of Dark Horse to this day. Right now, they put out the H.P. Lovecraft editions of different stories that he wrote from a manga guy, which I thought was cool. It may be something they just bought the rights to publish here. I don't know, but I enjoy those volumes. I think they're very well done if you haven't checked those out before. They have a lot of different stuff, like Call of Cthulhu, or Cthulhu, or whatever we're calling that guy. Mountains of Madness, different stuff like that. I've read some of those. I reviewed some of them here for the channel. They have some different short story collections with 3 stories in one of those H.P. Lovecraft books, and those are cool. But my main love for for Dark Horse is what I just gave away, the Star Wars stuff that they did back in the day. Especially when they did the Clone Wars era, which I never read until about 2018 when I had my back injury and I got a new Kindle for Christmas for my wife. I mentioned this earlier. I got to read, with some Christmas money, the 3 omnibuses that were on digital for dirt cheap at the time, by the way. I think I got them on a Christmas sale for $10 or $12 or something. I got to read those 3 or 4 Clone Wars omnibuses of the Star Wars Dark Horse comics. And I'm telling you, dude, you do not understand how good Star Wars can be until you kind of get away from the movies and maybe play the games, or in this case, you read the Clone Wars cartoon. I'm telling you, or read the Clone Wars comics, I mean. I'm telling you, those Clone Wars comics from from Dark Horse were some of the best comics I've ever read in my life. They develop Obi-Wan and Anakin so well there. And some of the other Jedi, too. Like Quinlan Vos, for example, who I love to death, too. They develop those characters so extremely well and do so much with them. And hit on stories like when Anakin has to deal with a Sand People Jedi guy that's a big character later on in comics, in case you don't know, and stories in Star Wars universe. That character that he deals with is a big deal. Then you look at like Star Wars, is it Star Wars Legacy? Is that the one in the future following Cade Skywalker, Luke Skywalker's like grandson or great-grandson or something? That's really good stuff from what I read. I think I read 2 volumes of that. I never got to finish it. That's really good stuff. Dark Horse used to put out banging Star Wars stuff, especially compared to what Marvel and Disney have been doing. So anyway, my point is, I prefer American comics. I won't keep raving on about this stuff. I'm sorry for such a long video to, answer you guys like Tortaviejo. But I have a lot to say about this because I care about this issue, and because I think in a lot of ways, from my exposure to things like shonen from manga, or with Marvel and DC, especially at American comics, or the shittier indie companies like IDW, for example, who just puts out fucking crap like their terrible Goosebumps comics they did. Those things, I think in both entertainment parts of this industry for comics in both countries, I think both are on a very, very dangerous cliff. And yet, for some reason, they both decided to put blindfolds on and do a little jig. You know what I mean? Like, they're playing with fire. I think the comic industry here in America realizes it's burning down, which scares me over my digital comics, because God knows you probably won't be able to keep those. And there's not a whole lot of publication of stuff into physical media anymore either, except for this new crap that comes out. My point is, I love, and I grew up with, so much stuff from American comics that I don't think the Japanese stuff I grew up with from anime, like I said, my favorite superhero being Goku probably, from all entertainment, period, I don't think it amounts to, as much as I love it, I don't think it amounts to the same amount of love as what I give towards American comic stuff. And I really think when it comes to storytelling, despite manga being way overhead, and way, way better about a beginning, middle, and end per series or per story. And I prefer that so much because characters can actually do something and actually have something happen to them and actually evolve as a character from the writing or anything. That's most of the time a great thing. It can sometimes in manga be a bad thing. Meanwhile, in America, we just keep telling the same fucking stories over and over again. We keep referencing the same stories over and over again. There are some characters that are big deals, like Thor, for example, that to this day you have one read, maybe 2 authors, Jason Aaron and, Walt Simonson, that actually have a run on him that are well known and beloved by the fans, and everything outside of those 2 runs people love. People hate. Like, people don't talk about. People don't have any interest in talking about or checking out at some point. And that's a shame, in my opinion. We should be doing better than that. And not just keeping characters around because they were popular at one point. I've never met a hardcore Thor guy. Never met one. But I have met a lot of Spider-Man fans and Iron Man fans. Even before Iron Man's movie came out, I knew Iron Man fans. So anyway, I really wish that American comics could do better, and I hope that the compacts, and I hope that the creators and stuff, with the Marvel Premiere collections, and hopefully newer writers, I wish that they would take more notes from people like Scott Snyder, Jeff Johns, folks like that, and do better about their storylines. Get away from the politics stuff, tell a fucking story, for God's sake. I don't even care if you reference old things. I don't care if you even remake old stories. Not reference them, not bring them up, but I mean actually remake directly a story and expand upon it. I would be cool with you doing that as long as you don't bring politics to the table. Because again, you don't have that problem in manga. You have it filled every fucking where in American comics. And it's terrible. No one likes that. And the people who do like that, they don't buy that shit. So they don't really count in the grand scheme of things. And Marvel and DC are too damn dumb to realize that, and IDW is too damn dumb to realize that. So anyway, that's a long video. I'm sorry for rambling so much. I have other things to do, and I'm sure you do too. I hope I covered everything in depth enough. Thank you again to Torta Viejo. Thank you all for being patient with me. And I would love to hear down in the comments what you all think about this discussion. What are your favorites? What are your least favorite things about both industries, manga and American comics? What are your favorite series from both? What do you read religiously from those things? What are newer stuff from manga you're reading? What are the horror stuff from manga that you actually recommend to me? I'd love to hear all that down below too. Thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Catch you later, and goodbye.